It's actually at a very opportune time because our aim in this session will be, firstly, the first and foremost aim will be to keep you awake because we just all had a lovely lunch, and I think to keep everybody's attention for the rest of the day, it is important that we go through this next 1 hour safely. If you go through this part, then you will survive the rest of the day. So, to keep you awake, I think I have 4 very eminent panelists here, starting from this end, Mr. Vinod Sood from Cruise System, Managing Director of Cruise System, Mr. Christoph from Medidis in Berlin, Germany. I am Vijay Thadani, you already know. This is Arijit Banerjee from Tata Communications. And finally, we have Gaurav Malik. I'm sorry, I just lost for a second. That's the postman. Gaurav Malik from Systemic Success. Oh, sorry, Successive Technologies. I'm sorry, I got to second post-lunch. All right, so very nice to see all of you. And in the next 60 odd minutes that we have, or less than 60 now, here is what we are wanting to cover through our conversation. Provide you an overview of whether indeed these emerging technologies, which are right now just getting showered on us, they're coming from the woodwork from all over the place. The latest in the list, which I'm sure everybody is very familiar with, ChatGPT, right? It's just one of them, but it's in an overall area called generative AI. But we talk about that as well. And I think the question which people are asking is this for real? And for that, I think we trace back our roots and say, when these technologies have come about, have these been for real or not? So I'll just set the stage and then I'll ask my fellow panelists to make some opening comments, after which we'll get into a Q&A. And please feel free to ask us questions, definitely just after they have finished their respective opening remarks. But after that, as and when you would like to ask a question. So just my small bit, and that's just to get the show going, is first of all, whenever I think of emerging technologies, whether it's for hype or for real, let's talk of emerging technologies. What comes to my mind is, where do we experience technologies of the future first? We experience that very interestingly in science fiction movies. We experience them in cartoons. And you can see that some of those things which we experienced have actually come around to become a reality. So that's one dimension, science fiction movies and cartoons giving us way to an interesting observation about the next set of technologies. Some examples of that, we now take our phone, our mobile phone, in which we can speak on video, for granted. But if you remember Star Trek, when Captain Kirk used to use the communicator, right? That time it used to be very real that he is able to, and that was the birth of the idea of a device which you can hold in hand and have a video chat. Or for that matter, smart assistants, which again have their roots in the same genre of shows that we saw, Star Trek, Back to the Future, Jetsons, the cartoon part of the Jetsons, and in Jetsons you had the autonomous cars which you could pack and put them in your pocket. Now that has not happened. Neither has Captain Kirk's Beam Me Up Scotty happened. But I think these are indicators of what could come in future. So I think that's one dimension through which we can examine, and therefore, if you've recently watched Avatar, and we have been talking about metaverse, but Avatar, they both indicate, both the versions of Avatar are an implementation of metaverse. And that can lead us to imagine what kind of a future that we can look forward to see. So that's one dimension. The second dimension in which we examine emerging technologies is through the Gartner Hype Cycle. You would have heard about, or are most familiar with the Gartner Hype Cycle, which Gartner publishes once in a year, most certainly, and then sector-wise, they publish through the year. So the Gartner Hype Cycle typically has technologies which start at the innovation trigger and then end and go through, let's say, a peak of inflated expectations, which is the next stage, to the trough of disillusionment, and then finally they settle down to the plateau of productivity. If you see generative AI, ChatGPT being an example of that, or autonomous systems, these are at this point of time in the innovation trigger stage. And therefore these will mature and generate value for organizations over the next 3 to 5 years. 0 to, actually 2 to 10 years is the range in which they normally talk about. On the other hand, many of the technologies that we talk about today, they are already in the plateau of productivity and they are also emerging as far as we are concerned. So the hypothesis here is that when you catch or look at the Gartner Hype Cycle, you can actually estimate what is going to make a very big difference. And it's an ability of the organization to pick up from the 10 or 12 horses which run at this innovation trigger place and back a few of them, and then those lead to either success or failure, as the case may be, or disappointment. The third element which I think we need to look at when we are looking at emerging technologies, I think is the relevance to our own country and our own ecosystem. Now in the past, whenever a new technology came, the areas that we would discuss is it available here? Do we have the capability? And finally we'll stop at, is it affordable? The good news is that since the time when we used to examine technology saying this is distant and it will land up here in 5 years' time, today things happen in India at the same time, sometimes a little ahead before they happen elsewhere in the world. And the reason for that is India is also the largest tinkering lab. The maximum number of prototypes of any solution are actually happening in the country. The second part in India's favor is that India is not only a large consumer of emerging technologies, but is also a large provider. And therefore, to that extent, for us to play at the innovation trigger element of technology makes a lot of sense. And we have the capability in terms of a trained workforce, a large number of 6.5 million graduates coming out, a large number of which are with strong technology skills. I think these are great advantages that we have. And in the current environment in which we are holding the G20, where India has the presidency, it's a very opportune moment for us to see how India can play a stronger role in making these emerging technologies become visible to the world at a faster pace. So this is the backdrop. This is the backdrop in which I would deal with, now talk to the other panelists. And one question which I would throw it open to all of them and make their opening comments about, what is their definition of an emerging technology? What are the emerging technologies that they are identifying in their frame of activity? How do they strategize? How do they figure out? How do they select which technologies to back? How do they figure out or are there institutionalized processes like a framework, which I think you want to talk about, which will enable organizations to figure out what is the investment and how do we get a return on that investment? And largely, is there a process in which the rest of the ecosystem, which is fellow members of the industry, government, and other parts of the ecosystem contribute? So I would request them to cover all these areas in their opening remarks. Each may actually talk about a specific issue. For example, Christoph wants to talk about ESG, the dimension of sustainable technologies, and the dimension of ESG to play an important role in figuring out what kind of emerging technology one has to look at. So like I think each one of them would highlight their part, and then we will get into a Q&A. So without further ado, let me start from the same right-hand side. Q&A will do from the left-hand side. Is that okay? All right. So over to you, Vinod.
So thank you, Mr. Adani, and thank you, CII, for inviting me. And interestingly, before lunch, I was at the Taj Palace, the CII Partnership Summit. I was on a panel, and the topic there was innovate or perish, the technology leap. And now we have a panel here, and the topic for us is related, but slightly orthogonal. So I come from Hughes System, which is a digital engineering services company, and we work with customers worldwide, helping them adopt and implement some of the technologies which we are going to talk about. So if you see, many of the emerging technologies, they exhibit a lot of potential to deliver a high degree of efficiency and competitive advantage to its early adopters. However, I think it's important to recognize that not all emerging technologies will necessarily live up to the hype, and in fact some may take longer to mature, okay, and achieve mainstream adoption than the others. I think it's also important to approach new technologies with a critical and thoughtful mindset, weighing the potential gains against the risk of implementation and the overall impact they can make. So I think overall this is a pretty complex area, and success and failure will depend on a wide range of factors, including technological innovation maturity of the organization or the society or even the government, public and the regulatory policies in place, and also the social acceptance. I'll take few examples of technologies in terms of whether they fit in the hype or in the reality. The first one I'll talk about is autonomous or self-drive cars. As you all know, many technologies are involved in making self or autonomous driving a reality. In fact, if you remember, aircrafts have been successfully using autopilot since 1960s or 70s, while more recently, automatic parking has been mainstream. But actually, if we look at the course of self-driven cars, a lot actually is yet to be accomplished. It is increasingly, looking like that we have underestimated, by order of magnitude, the depth, scale and complexity of processing and multitasking which a human brain can do, something that is far from what AI is trying to imitate. And if you see, as far as the self-driving cars technology is concerned, even the tens of thousands of dollars of LiDAR, optical processing and sensors, in terms of the reality this technology becoming mainstream, okay, it is still far, far away. Another recent tech which went through the hype cycle was big data. Okay. Big data was going to transform everything from cancer treatment to agriculture. As it happens, the steam ran out very quickly, and now this entire big data has got merged or sucked into the AI concept. Another one which we have been hearing recently is quantum computing. The most common misconception about quantum computing is that it can work on multiple solutions in parallel or something like that. Actually, it cannot. And even if it could, the act of measuring the outcome would cause the mixed state to collapse into one. As of now, primarily quantum computing is being used, okay, to build highly tuned random number generators. So in that context, quantum computing is probably a close second to AI in terms of the hype. Hype around approaches, timelines, and the actual use cases or the applications where it's going to be applied. So, significant amount of research and development and investment is going into quantum computing, but in terms of the published reports, what is very clear is that it's going to be only around 2029 or 2030 that it's going to be mainstream. So while there is always the potential for hype and exaggerated claims surrounding new technologies, in reality the gap between reality and hype also is closing very fast, and this is because technology is becoming a key enabler for transformation and innovation. So many technologies in reality have already demonstrated significant potential for real world applications,